welcome to This Is. Today, we are going to be answering your questions all about the Xbox Series X, the Series S, and all the wonderful next-gen consoles that you want to know about.
Well, not the PS5. We're not going to talk about that.
Matt, how much is Microsoft paying you?
Not enough. So the first question we have comes all the way from Twitter. Why does the PS5 have 4,000 backwards compatible PS4 games, but the Xbox Series X just has 500 games across Xbox 360 and Xbox One?
So that is actually not a completely true statement. So right now I have a early prototype of the Series X. It's not final hardware, and it is certainly not final software. So at the very moment, right now as we're recording this, I can play a little over 500 games that are backwards compatible on this. However, every week since I've had this and going forward, they're adding more. So last week they added like 300 more. I get the impression that they actually have the vast majority of these games up and running, but they're just sending out updates time after time to send those games out. So by the time that the Series X and the Series S are shipping, my expectation is the vast majority of games that were playable on Xbox One via backwards compatibility or just natively on the console should work on the Series S and the X.
Will the cover art for the new Xbox games only have the Series X branding, as the Series S doesn't have a disc drive?
Oh, that's a good question. So yes would be my thought, because if you buy a Series X disc, it only works on the Series X, even though that game, if you buy it digitally, would work on the Series S. I haven't seen that final box art at the moment, so they could just call it Xbox Series, but it would make a ton of sense for them to specifically say it is for the Series X, because what you don't want is little Timmy to get his Xbox Series S for Christmas and a couple of Xbox Series X discs, and he won't be able to play them.
Does the Xbox Series X have a dust filter? Is it easy to clean it?
No, it does not have a dust filter. So it actually, I don't think is crazy difficult to clean it. I mean,
Doesn't look like it.
Look, you have to keep in mind that you're not supposed to take this thing apart. Will it be possible? Sure. But the thing is, the grills on the top are big enough that I actually don't think you'll have a lot of like really fine dust attached to it.
Yeah, and I think that with just a can of aerosol duster, it would clean this out really well.
Yeah, there's a lot of access to the cooling from the bottom and from the top. I mean, sure, if you have this thing in a super dusty location for a long period of time, like any other electronic, you will get it dusty, but there's no kind of like dust filter like a PC. It is all very wide open.
Not anything about the console, just wondering. Are there plans to bring unreleased games from the OG 360 to backwards compatibility program?
I don't believe so.
I doubt it.
They announced, I believe 2 years ago, they announced a little while ago that they were essentially stopping developing for the original Xbox and the 360 games for back compat. I think the main reason for that is actually just because of licensing. So the way I understand it, especially to like resell these games, it requires the developer to sign up. It's a bit of a process, and it sounds like the vast majority of games that can be backwards compatible and they can feasibly get their hands on the developers and the code and everything, that's already happened. So I wouldn't be completely surprised if there are a random couple of games here or there that do get optimized for backwards compatibility. But it sounds like at this point, if you can play on an Xbox One, sure, it'll continue to work generally speaking. But if there's a game that has never been backwards compatible, it's pretty unlikely at this point that it will get a patch.
I agree. Yeah, like at this point, unless it's like a remaster or...
There's all kinds of problems with these old games, between like music licensing, the fact that a lot of these developers either may not exist anymore, or these developers may be, I don't know, have been purchased or absorbed by Sony or whatever. There's a lot of licensing issues in there. And I think that basically if it can be updated, it's pretty much been updated at this point with maybe a few exceptions.
How well will it fare in battle against Roboraptor? I'll go ahead and field this one.
All you, man.
Roboraptor would tear this thing apart.
Yeah, look, you can build the most powerful console in the world, sure, whatever. But what you can't build is heart.
This video is sponsored by Audible.
Audible is your one-stop shop for all spoken word entertainment as well as audiobooks. So recently, I have been listening to How to Build a Car by Adrian Newey, which if you're at all interested in the history of Formula One, is an incredibly interesting story, but you can pick from a wide variety of different titles that are all up and down the service. And one of the nice things is, once you get one of those audiobooks, you actually get to keep it.
In addition to all of that, they also have Audible Stories.
Now this is an amazing new initiative, which essentially allows anyone, anywhere, to go to stories.audible.com, and you'll get access to a ton of content completely free. So whether you're a student, a parent, a teacher, all of it is there, no login required. Literally, it's right there in the browser, which is an incredibly cool thing that they're doing. But if you're interested in the full Audible experience, definitely head over to audible.com/thisis, or you can text "thisis" to 500-500. Again, that is audible.com/thisis, or text "thisis" to 500-500. You can get yourself not only those free audiobooks, but a ton of excellent spoken word content. And of course, huge shout out to Audible for sponsoring This Is.
Will it only accept the first-party memory card SSD, or will it be able to use external hard drives like the previous Xbox and PS4?
Yes, and yes-ish. So, of course, that memory expansion slot, at the moment, there's only a single option. It's a 1 terabyte Seagate. They've been on record a little bit open-ended to the idea that there may be other manufacturers. There may be other companies who just build like some kind of like adapter to use it. I would be very surprised if we don't see that at some point, because essentially it is a very fast PCIe 4.0 SSD. But you will need that to play Series S and X games, right? So that expansion module will give you the same speed as the internal SSD, which games expect, right? So that's one side of the equation. Now, it does have a number of USB ports, and you can actually plug in a hard drive to it, but that will only work for your Xbox One or older games, right? So if you have an Xbox One right now and you have a bunch of games loaded on your hard drive, you should just be able to plug it in and it should just work. But the problem is that will not work going forward for new games, right? So my thought would be, say you have the Series S, right?
Yeah.
Obviously a fairly small 512 gig SSD. The smart move is probably going to be to install your Series S games on the internal SSD. And if you have any kind of Xbox 360 or Xbox One games, run those off of a cheap USB hard drive so you kind of get the best of both worlds.
Why is their memory expansion almost the price of the Series S and almost half the price of the Series X?
So obviously the Series X has a 1 terabyte SSD built in.
Right.
You also have a 512 gig SSD inside the Series S. But the pricing, I will definitely agree, seems a little bit odd, right? So specifically with the Series S, you get a 512 gig SSD and an entire console for $300, whereas for a little over $200, you're getting just the 1 terabyte SSD. Now, I'm not completely shocked by this. The SSDs are expensive, right? If you look at a PCIe 4.0 SSD, especially a 1 terabyte, they're not cheap. And considering that it's a proprietary form factor, blah, 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 someone's got to make money, it's a little more expensive than I'd like, but it's not completely crazy.
It's not. A lot of people are just saying it's like way wild off, but it's.
I mean, 180 to 200, I think I would have been like totally fine. I think a little bit, it's a touch more, but these things are expensive. I do expect that they will come down, and I do think that there will be either third-party options or later first-party options. That being said, I think with that pricing, Series S, you should not buy one. Like, that's crazy. If you're gonna buy the 1 terabyte for the Series S, you should just get a Series X at that point.
More of like a long-term spreading out of that cost versus all up front. It really depends on, I think, the financial situation of you're in.
Yeah, but like, I just think if you have the extra $200, buy the Series X, right?
That's
you're getting
fair,
the space and you're getting the extra performance. And then one of the interesting counterpoints is what Sony's done, right? So they've built in a smaller SSD. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 800 gigabytes, I believe, something like that.
825, I believe.
Yes, but the alternative there is that as opposed to a specific like expansion module, you just have an empty M2 slot. So you can install your own PCI 4.0 SSD on the PS5.
Assuming that it's actually a compatible, up to spec. I feel like there's gonna be a lot of confusion with the PS5 for that.
Well, that's one of the big questions when the PS5 comes out. I really want to test is, can you just buy a PCI 4.0 SSD, throw it in? Because a lot of those SSDs are very, very hot, and you need like some kind of heatsink on top.
How will the X compare with the Series S in terms of texture, resolution, frames, etc. for something like Red Dead Redemption 2?
The differences between the X and the S on the hardware level are essentially boiled down to the GPU. So you got a 12 teraflop GPU here, 4 teraflop on the Series S. Now, the downside to that is that means in raw, like pixel pushing power, the Series S is less powerful than the Xbox One X. And therefore, even though there are a lot of RDNA 2.0 improvements and blah, 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 but it is not powerful enough to run a 1X optimized game. At some point in the future, we'll be able to take a closer look at how the Series S performs compared to the X. But from what we can talk about and what we know right now, the Series S will essentially be running Xbox One games like a 1S, not a 1X. So you'll be losing out on the 4K. Specifically Red Dead, that should be a pretty major difference because the load times will be faster. But if you've ever played Red Dead 2, the Xbox Series X, the Xbox One X looks far superior to the standard Xbox One. It is really a night and day difference. Right. And it seems like at the moment, the Series S will be running it at that lower spec.
Yeah, and I think the difference is going to be a lot smaller for something like Fortnite, where, it's a less hyper-realistic texture.
And there are differences too, right? Because, so if you look at a game that is taking advantage of dynamic resolution, like I believe Red Dead 2 does, you actually might get better performance. You should get better performance, right? It will be able to hit whatever its maximum native resolution is, its maximum sort of frame rate if it's variable, which it's not really for Red Dead. So it should be better, but my advice at the moment, having not fully gotten to grips with everything, is if you really care about Xbox One games, if you're gonna be really playing a lot of titles that are still native to Xbox One that aren't getting an optimized version, the Series X is the better console.
If I'm on a budget and care more about FPS than 4K, would the Xbox Series S be the way to go? I'm only asking because I keep hearing the S will be able to support up to 120 FPS, which to that, I'd take that over 4K for the extra $200.
For that, I think we're gonna actually have to wait and see. So, there are a couple of games that have been announced that are going to be running at 120 FPS on the Series S. Those would be Gears 5, which is 1080p 120 in the multiplayer, and I believe there's a Dirt demo that also shows 120 FPS gameplay on Series S. Now, you're probably going to be gaming, especially if you're gaming at 120, you're probably going to be at 1080p or so. Probably. I would be my guess. But we have to wait to see how many other games will support that.
It would be cool to show a video of side-by-side load time, but would also include the quick resume, see how those extra minutes will add up. So I'll take this one as well. Stay tuned for that. It's coming soon.
I mean, I can confirm that quick resume is on the order of a handful of seconds, whereas most games, like while you can do the load time comparisons, that doesn't account for all the menus and all the other stuff in front. Super fast. Quick resume is really, really nice, and I never want to play another console game without it.
Essentially, I'm spending $500 to have games I've already played load faster and have higher frame rates. Why should I get it now versus wait till they have an actual Series X game to play it with?
Well, I mean, if that's the way you want to look at it, I mean, sure. And obviously, waiting is, generally speaking, pretty good advice for any console launch. There's always improvements. I mean, if you want to wait years, there's going to be a slim version. I mean, look, you can always wait for technology. But my thought is, if you're going to get on board with a console generation, do it sooner than later because you're going to enjoy it for that much longer, right? You buy this thing and you know it's going to last for 5, 6, 7 years. You're going to have the best gaming experience that entire time. Sure, are some of your older games going to load a little bit faster and look slightly better? Yeah, but guess what? There's not a downside, right? I mean, if you get a Series X, it's going to be at the very least equivalent, if not better. And on the flip side, as these games start coming out, the patches, the updated optimizations, the full-on Series X games, all of those will be ready to be played by you immediately. So, sure, you can always feel free to wait.
I'll give you my use case. So I'm upgrading from an OG Xbox One, like the launch version of that. Me getting it day one is just going to improve my entire experience of that back catalog.
Yep.
While I wait for an actual, Series X game. So if you're coming from like a 1X, yeah, you probably shouldn't get it right now. It's the same for PlayStation, the same for any console that's coming out. If you have already played the games, just wait for it. How many times can you download to, delete from, and read and write on the SSD before it dies?
A lot. I don't believe that Microsoft has released a specific read-write count like a lot of PC SSDs would be. But generally speaking, an SSD on the PC space, and these seem to be fairly high quality SSDs, at least from everything I've heard, will support you reading and writing, or specifically writing over the SSD, like the entire thing, like once a day for years.
How many can you stack before they fall over?
We'd have to follow you on Twitter to find out, wouldn't we? Thank you very much for watching this episode of This Is. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to check out our wonderful sponsor, Audible, at that link in the description. And let us know what you want to know about this brand new generation of consoles.